presentation, little miniature presentation. You want to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
While we let people log in. So we are waiting for the presentation before I start.
Yeah. Oh, I have the little slide we always have. Do you want to do those,
Yeah.
or you want to do that a little bit later? Or you want to talk
Go
about the
ahead.
Slack? In fact, we don't have, we can continue talking and things like that. We just have the as always the presentation to stuff. Whoop. Oh, sure. All right. Everybody see that?
Yes,
Yep.
I can see.
Okay. So did you want to talk about the Slack, Mr.
Yeah, you got to update the slides though. It's no longer Palm Beach Tech. This is going to trip me up for a while. So Palm Beach Tech is a nonprofit organization dedicated to building Florida's into a tech hub. They have recently expanded from Palm Beach and gone to South Florida. We've partnered with Broward and Miami counties, and the coalition is Palm Beach Tech Hub. Palm Beach Tech, just Tech Hub, South Florida. So I'm dropping a link in the chat for the Slack room. We are a very active dev community. There is a developers channel. Anything and everything related to development goes on in there. Some days it's real quiet and it's just Damien and I posting random coding gifs and laughing at each other's bad jokes. Other times, some people post questions and other people are responding to that. So if you have a question about anything, post it in the dev channel. I guarantee there's someone who is willing to help out. And if someone posts a question in there, it's a great way to give back to the community by volunteering some time and helping another person out. Just recently, I've been working a lot in React, and I'm getting into QA testing. There's a lot of React developers in the channel, so I threw out the question, what QA testing tool should I be looking into? Started a thread and got a whole bunch of information in there. So it's always good to do. So
okay. So the other thing
we want to join the channel.
Okay, so perfect. One of the things that I want to just we're going to talk to Brian in just a minute. If you guys don't know already, Karen already showed us meetup.com/FloridaJS. We're run by myself, Damien, Jeremy just talked, and then Jeannie normally is here. That's the other person, and they're a 3-person group that joined Palm Beach, JavaScript, Boca.js, and React. React Broward, I think, or Broward React. Next month, at the end of the month, we will have the famous Ray Bango. I even heard that some of you guys know him. It is was a senior developer advocate at Microsoft. He now works for another company, and he's going to talk about how hackers play with our websites, to get through. So come join us then. If you want to thank us for having this, first, Brian will give him his information. Please follow Brian, or anything that Brian tells you to do it, no matter what. Right? Right, Brian? But if you want to thank us, do me a favor, go to youtube.com/FloridaJS and just subscribe. Just a simple subscribe. You don't need to turn on notifications. That makes me feel better, and that's what it's all about, right? But so I jumped into our presentations only because of the fact that we had Brian here, but I think we're here to hear more about it. Do you feel, Brian, that this is, Jeremy, do we feel it's a good time for Brian to start?
Yeah, we usually start quarter hour. I usually wait for the influx of people to start slowing down, and I haven't seen any come in a couple minutes. And as soon as I say that, other people are starting coming in.
Yes. It's amazing, everybody. I do apologize every so often. You might have to wait in line. I'm trying to eliminate that from the group. But it is something that if just bear with me. Last week it took me a long time to remember that, so there was a lot of you sitting there, and all of a sudden I pressed a button, and boom, 30 of you showed up, which I really appreciate.
Yep.
So just bear with us as Zoom decides. I literally had to allow Brian in, allow Jeremy in, and all of a sudden, the moment I did that, that was like, that's enough, and everybody came in. And then the last person that just came in, I had to click on allow it again. So I don't know what's going on.
Well, because I've been clicking the allow button.
Thank you.
I've been doing it. I'm the co-host. So the last thing I'd like to typically talk about is, we're always looking for speakers. This is a group for us by us. We are Damien, Jeannie, and I are always looking for speakers to come speak at the events. We're reaching out to other individuals. That's how I snagged Dougie. I reached out to him on Twitter, and he so graciously agreed to join us. But we also want to hear from you. This is a great opportunity. I'm a firm believer in, if you're in the middle of learning something, the best way to learn it is to teach it. So we often forget something. So if you're in the middle of it, yeah, keep going. If you're in the middle of learning something, that's a great time to come give a talk about it. So you don't have to be an expert to come out and talk. So reach out to Damien or myself via the Slack channel or the Twitter, and we'll get you set up. This is this community is as strong as you guys are. So let's make it the best we can be.
You do not
so without
have to
further ado, let's bring it over to Dougie.
Dougie, it's all you, my friend. I'm going to make you a co-presenter so that you're in control. I think everybody can, but just in case.
I can share a screen too as well.
I think you've always been able to, but that will mean that you can definitely do.
Okay, well,
all right.
Confirmed.
Love it.
Well, hey, thanks for the opportunity. And Jeremy, thanks for reaching out to me directly on Twitter. I always tell people to DM me. My DMs are open, which you'll find out later on. Well, you won't find out. You'll know where my Twitter is, which is, this is actually my website. And I figured I'd start here because I don't know if I have a proper slide with everything on it. I guess I'll have to remember that later. But yeah, I'm bdougie Live. bdougie Live is my site. I go by bdougie. My name is Brian Douglas. I was actually raised in Tampa, Florida. Cut my teeth. Good question. Is this recording? I guess it's streaming live to YouTube, so it should be recording live.
Yes.
But what I was getting at is my first talks were actually not at Tampa Ruby Brigade, but it was actually in Orlando. My first job was in Orlando. I learned how to code back in 2013 and transitioned from sales to web development. And then I've been doing that for ever since, sort of, and I'll get into that. But I'm going to talk about GitHub Actions. I'm curious if y'all in the chat, it'd be great to sort of if you want to do emoji, yes or no. Has anybody ever heard of GitHub Actions? I'm going to assume GitHub, but let me know if you haven't heard of GitHub too, and I could slow down and explain that as well. No judgment. I always try to take the stance of Stan Lee, where imagine everyone's issue is someone's first issue. So if this is literally your first meetup, it'd be great to let me you don't have to put yourself out there, but definitely if you've never heard of GitHub or something like that, hit me up in a DM. I'll give you all the context you need if you do need it. But I definitely was first time ever went to a meetup, that person, awkward, didn't know what what to do or what they were talking about, but it was great to make connections with the community. So my GitHub handle is going to be in the bottom right. Sorry, my Twitter handle will be in the bottom right, bdougie. I'll show my GitHub handle later. And let me see if I got this. Okay, cool. So GitHub, most of you seem like you know GitHub. If not, we are a decentralized platform built on the blockchain on an open source protocol called Git. I'm just kidding. It's a collaboration tool. It's a tool for you to collaborate with your coworkers, your boot camp students, your college class, your professor or whatnot. It's a great way to collaborate with code. And especially since at the moment, this meetup's all remote, it's a great little tool to have too as well. I failed to even check to see if my right mic was actually connected to as well. Let me do that real. Oh yeah, we're good.
Yeah, we hear you. Okay.
All right, perfect. Yes, every now and then my headphones connect, and then if it's a new Zoom, and then you'll get a weird tinny version of me. This is me, full HD, Dolby Digital. If you have surround, definitely turn. I'm just kidding. I don't have that. So yeah, it's GitHub. I do point to this, my mouth right now, because just recently last week, I was featured on github.com/readme/Brian Douglas. If you want to know how I got into development, which I don't talk about that a lot because I kind of just spent a lot of time in my earlier career writing blogs about wanting to be a developer. And then almost 7-8 years later, my coworker's hey, do you want to be featured on this thing? And I said, yes. So if you do want to learn about my story and how I decided to learn how to program and why I did it after getting a finance degree and then doing sales for 4 years. That's a great article. But I do want to jump into the content, which this is it. I am the Beyonce of GitHub. I claimed this title. No one has actually tried to claim it from me. So just like Game of Thrones, I will be queen. But I say this because I joke because I'm a developer advocate at GitHub. Specifically, I'm a Beyonce advocate. But seriously, my goal is to educate GitHub users about new features, existing features. So there might be stuff I show here that you're like, I've been using GitHub for 10 years and I've never knew that you could assign people to issues, which it's happened before in a conversation. And then to summarize what I do as I go back for the hive. So if there's a feature that you're like, hey, why does GitHub not do this? I love getting those feature requests because then I just go ahead and open a GitHub issue. Surprise, GitHub uses GitHub to build GitHub. So we do open issues for feature requests and support tickets and stuff like that. But that's what I literally do. But this talk is about GitHub Actions, and GitHub Actions, y'all are familiar, at least semi-familiar with it. I've seen the sort of the links and stuff like that. Maybe it was my fault. To summarize GitHub Actions, it's a way for GitHub to get out of the way and give you features that don't exist. I don't know if that kind of summarized that well, and I'm not in marketing, so please don't shin this to our marketing team. But it's all about workflow automation. And what it does is we have these primitives that we call in GitHub. So when you think about the GitHub API, that's a primitive. GitHub API has been around as long as GitHub. Like 1 month after GitHub was launched, they basically opened up the API and made it public, which is why so many other tools integrate with GitHub so well, because APIs has been around so long. If you've ever built any APIs as well, I've had the privilege of working at 2 other companies besides GitHub, and we built with the GitHub API integrated into it, and it was really nice and a nice experience, nice ergonomic experience to leverage. So highly recommend if you haven't built the GitHub API, I've got some tips for you in a sec. But also one thing I didn't mention, the other primitives, webhooks, authentication through JWTs. We have some other stuff, just interactions with the repo. Those are all built in to GitHub Actions by default, which we'll get into it. Something else I did, which I can't cover every single aspect of GitHub Actions in the short meetup talk, which I failed to even ask what my time limit was. So we're just going to assume you'll listen to me as long as I'm going to talk.
Yeah, it's really up to you.
All night? Okay, excellent. All right. I'm going to text. I'll text my wife to put the kids to bed because we're gonna really get into this. I'm just kidding. I only have like probably 40 slides. But I'm happy to do freeform and do some live coding if questions come in. But I did this thing, the 28 days of GitHub Action tips. It was sort of like, if you ever met a developer advocate or people who do DevRel, you kind of build a lot of content in like the last year doing conference talks and meetup talks. They weren't non-existent, but there was like less inventory for conference talks. So I just wanted to get all this content out because I had all these talks I wanted to give. So I just made 28 of them in 2-minute video form that would help support just what I wanted to talk about, like in times like this. So I can't cover every aspect, but if you're interested in deep diving into GitHub Actions outside of this, the general documentation or beginner tutorials, that's what this is. So definitely take a look at that. One of the actions that I actually showcased that I built was how I automate my storybook, which is my design system. So if you aren't familiar with Storybook.js, if you do any, this is FloridaJS, so I guess I can make some assumptions. But if you're doing any front-end development, the idea of the design system, you build your components up front, so that way you can have them reusable across the team. GitHub, we actually have a design system called Primer, which not a lot of people know about, but it's completely open source. If you wanted to rebuild GitHub with the same UI, you could with Primer, which I should probably do. That'd be a great little example app, nice little weekend project. But some people might know Bootstrap. Bootstrap is kind of the predecessor of the Primer. The guy who created Bootstrap works for GitHub. He led the design team for a short amount of time and created Primer, and that's why GitHub looks so consistent across the board. But this article is really about how I took my design system and automated it to deploy. So every time and I can show this, show the actual YAML later, but every time I push or make changes to my components in my React app or make changes to my Storybook components in the Storybook folder, I actually deploy a new version of my design system, which looks like this. I didn't show the project itself, but I have this project called opensourced.pizza. Actually, I should have practiced that .pizza. And it's a project really to encourage open source contributions, really to manage your open source contributions. I'm working on something that will hopefully encourage contributions, but I just started it, so it's not really that good. I would not recommend using it because you can't use it right now. But that's my design system. I automate that. The other option that, other idea of like GitHub Actions to sort of get your brain turning in your ideas and your questions coming, if you do have them, is the Lighthouse Action. Also, I am all for, like, if you want to stop me, unmute, ask me a question, like, let's make this interesting. You came to the meetup. If you want to get your answers, now is the time. So you won't throw me off if you unmute. Well, you throw me off, but you'll get an answer. But Lighthouse Action is one that I like. That the Lighthouse tool is built by the Chrome team, well, subset of the Chrome team. And they manage this thing to be able to understand web performance within your application. So web performance and accessibility. And what's nice is that you could actually run the CI for Lighthouse, the Lighthouse CI, and you can get a Lighthouse score if it goes up or down every time you get a PR. And this is great because I take a lot of open source contributions, and folks think that, TypeScript's the next greatest thing, or this is the next greatest thing. If you add it to my project and the Lighthouse score goes down, then you have to answer questions of like, how can we make that better before I merge this PR? And I wanted that because during the summer in Hacktoberfest as well, I was getting a lot of contributions to my project, and it's a front-end UI focused one. And I didn't want to be on the hook of trying to figure out accessibility for something I didn't build, or performance for something I didn't build. So I added this Lighthouse action to automate every time I have a PR. It actually deploys a version to Netlify deploy previews. And at the PR time, I get a link. And that same deploy preview link gets added to the Lighthouse CI. And then it gives me a score based on that. And it's before I even get, like, the PR opens when I'm sleeping. I get a Lighthouse score. I don't have to click the link. I know it's going to be good or bad. If it's good, let's move forward. If it's bad, let's address this before I waste my time looking at the UI. Let's make it right up front. And like, honestly, I recommend this for all types of teams. Like, let's just get this at the time of PR. Let's automate it to the point where we don't have to think about it. And I think that's a lot of times what we do is we take like linting as an example in our CI or Prettier or ESLint or whatever it is. And we don't have the, I guess what I'm getting at is, like, I used to have this conversation with my engineering team when I first moved to San Francisco for that company. And we would have engineering syncs about how to do like basically how to do linting, but manually. So it's like, hey, should we do single quotes, double quotes? And we waste so much time in the meeting talking about this nuanced stuff that didn't matter. So like
that is something you definitely discuss once, set ESLint rules,
yes,
and set it and forget it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a fan of doing this in your editor where you hit Control S, it automatically formats.
Yes, and that's what I have in my editor, and I want the rest of the team to do the same thing. So what I'm getting at is these examples are identify the repetitive task, like deploying a storybook because someone forgot, or linting your project, or adding a CI score to the PR comments. Like any sort of manual stuff you can do with GitHub Actions. So think of an action and how often you have to repetitively do that thing, and then apply it to GitHub's primitives, which is GitHub Action. A lot of folks focus on CI when you think of GitHub Actions because it's a really good story. Like, hey, I wrote some Jest test, or I wrote some testing library, or whatever it is. I just want those to run whenever someone pushes to the project. Awesome story, easy to do. CI, it definitely works. But if I can continue down the path of trying to explain this sort of repetitive task stuff, I'm going to use the NBA as an example. And there's an idea of like full court layups. So if you're not a basketball fan, in South Florida, I get it. The Heat, they're okay. I was always a Magic fan growing up. But they've been garbage since, well, forever, since Shaq left, basically. I think Dwight Howard gave him a good run, but that was about it. He left. So let's not go down the rabbit hole of basketball, but full court layups. You take the ball from one side of the hoop, or from your side of the hoop, or sorry, the court, and you take it all the way to the hoop. Sorry. Also, I understand, like, not everybody might be a basketball fan, so just think soccer, but with your hands. That's basketball. And the idea is, like, when I was in high school, the biggest thing was like doing like what Allen Iverson did, which is essentially take the ball from one side to the other side, do a full court layup. But there's 4 other people on the team. Why not automate portions that can be improved, and improve that, like, in like having actual plays to your team? one thing that I love referencing is NBA Jam as an opportunity, because NBA Jam is basically a full court layup, except it's dunking nonstop, not real basketball. Exactly. You got to go from downtown. You got to find the spot, which is Area 31. And I use this example because Area 31, I read a book called Hooponomics, and Hooponomics, it applies statistics to basketball. So they found that there's one spot on the court that you have 31% chance to actually get the ball in the hoop. It's the highest percent chance at all parts of the court to get in, because one, most players are right-handed, and two, it's a very difficult shot because you're so close and you can get the perfect arc. Actually, you don't have to have a perfect arc to even make it in. You can aim for the backboard. You just got to call brick. I mean, you got to call bank before you shoot it. Completely joking. Inside basketball if you don't play basketball, but Area 31 optimized to get the ball to that hoop. So rather than do this full court layup, you focused on getting the ball to this point. So again, going back to linting, knowing that every time you hit save, like build that into your project, build it into your ecosystem within your team, within your organization. So that way, if you change teams, you're not like completely like don't even understand what's going on because the other team did it this way. If you have VPs or if you're a CTO, like definitely consistency helps keep your team and not actually someone else's team. So this is a basically automation workflow, which is called a basketball play. You see the number one goes to number two, the Area 31. And if number two does not have a shot, they can kick it back out to 4. You can kick it to 3. It's like more of like the repetition to know like when something happens. So like when you hear tests fail, so like when your tests fail, like you need to get Area 31, then you know, okay, well, we need to adjust because now they're basically standing and they're going to cherry pick all of our shots because they know that's where our plays are. So you got to change it up. So I bring that up, and I didn't warn you that I was going to go a deep dive into basketball. I bring it up because we have these sort of frameworks that we build here at GitHub, but also we have open source tools as well to help this process much easier. So Probot is a framework to build GitHub applications. GitHub apps are kind of like the big brother of GitHub Actions. If you worked at a company like Travis or Heroku or Netlify or Vercel, you probably built a GitHub app or a similar company, and that's basic. Probot was a way to get you to do that pretty quick. We took a lot of learnings from Probot and then built GitHub Actions because we're like, hey, Probot's great, but the approach is like Probot is like if you want to build an application that you make money from and install in the GitHub repos, which is how I got my Netlify deploys. Instead, let's do GitHub Actions, which gives you that native experience specifically for your team, not for a third party looking to automate a portion of your workflow. OctaKit is the logo on the right. Not a lot of people know about OctaKit, but OctaKit is an SDK to interact with the GitHub API. I know about this because my previous employer was called Netlify. So if you've heard of it, or if not, I mentioned it a couple times, but I actually rebuilt OctaKit by accident. So basically I built an SDK to interface with GitHub's straight up API, which was not the way to go. It's probably look to see if someone built it already and then support that project through open source. But I love OctaKit. I just actually chatted with the maintainer last week on GitHub. GitHub has a Twitch account, and we talk to open source maintainers every Friday called Open Source Friday. But what I'm getting at, I'm going on a little tangent, but take the idea of like you're going to review a pull request once a day, once a week, hopefully at least once a day. If not, you're off my team. No, I'm just kidding. But if you know that's going to happen, what sort of task can you automate to get your team to actually look at your code? So is it automate the Slack messages, automate the Discord, automate, getting all the stuff in the row, making sure the linting is right. So that way you don't have conversations about like white space or tabs, spaces, whatever it is, like get all that stuff automated in the structure of the repository, and then you can move on. So I say all that because that's like the high level. Now these are going to be some real examples. Within GitHub Actions, within the GitHub Actions team, we built this thing called GitHub Script. So if you saw the previous slide, which was Probot and SDK, it's basically if you shoved Probot inside of GitHub Actions as well as OctaKit, that's what you get. Which is really interesting if you came from that space. If you did it, you don't need to know that context because I only spent one slide on it. But if I could explain how I use this personally myself, we ran this thing called the GitHub Hackathon. Actually, exactly a year ago, we started it. So it was March. Actually, it wasn't exactly a year ago. It was March 14th or 15th to April, first week of April. So we roughly 4 weeks. And the way we managed this is we actually had a GridSum site. That's a great app, and I'll talk about that app in a sec, Fork Bacon. But double great names. He actually changed his original name, his actual username, but I think he was trying to get a job or something. But but what I'm getting at is we had this View app that powered the GitHubHackathon.com. So you can go there right now if you wanted to. And the way we did this is we used GitHub repos as a backend. So all the things that you see right here, they're actually powered by one GitHub repo, which is our Hackathon repo. And the way you submit your GitHub action, so the hackathon itself was for GitHub Actions. You submit an action, and then you get some prize. We actually opened up a PR to add some JSON files to the actual repo, and that's how you get yourself on the front page. So the way we did that is we actually use a GitHub script. GitHub script, again, being Probot and OctaKit merged into a GitHub action. And the way we did this is we actually, what this unveils to us is we get to write JavaScript inside of our YAML, which is kind of mind-boggling and weird, but it works out well for our use case because all we wanted to do is take whenever a label featured or good was applied to a PR. So reminder, the JSON was added to the project. It would open up a PR, and then me and my team would basically grab our phone because we were actually in the alpha program for the iOS app. At that point, it was beta. We would basically just add a label on our phone on the GitHub app, and then it would merge in the project. If it was good enough to be on the homepage because it had like a good story, then we'd feature it. We'd add feature. If it was just good, we'd add good. And good basically gets you a prize. It just then gives you space on the homepage. And the cool thing about this is it actually, when you add the label, it does the GitHub action merges that PR for you with just those 5 lines of code. So we pass it on, and that's pretty much it. Like, check out the docs for more information. I could show you some other examples in GitHub script, but that's essentially what we did. Like, we knew that we wanted to merge these PRs quickly, so we added this whole label mechanism to be able to merge stuff and just keep the process moving. So Hooponomics. I bring up Steph Curry. I know we're a South Florida meetup, but Steph Curry, when I moved to the Bay Area, the Warriors started winning. So, and then I left, and then they lost. So I'm not sure if I'm the correlation, but yeah, it makes sense. Which is why I've asked for a raise for every company I work for, because I tend to be the money ball. But I bring up this idea of Steph Curry because he got popularized the 3-point shot again. He kind of made it new again, even though it's been around forever. He just took a lot of chances. He took a lot of shots from 23 because 20 feet beyond 23 feet, because he sort of perfected his arc. He automated the experience of getting the ball in the hoop through 3-point shots, which is quite different than Area 31. So I mentioned the statistics. Area 31% of all shots from that point is technically worth 0.62 points. So 2 points per basket, but if you keep missing, it's worth 0.60 points. So that's the sort of math that I've got there. If you shoot from beyond the 23 foot or the 3-point line, it's worth 1.6. So outside the line is 3 points. So the more attempts you take outside the 3-point shot or 3-point line, you get you can rack up the score, which is why the NBA was like hitting like lower 3-digit numbers, like 120 per team, which is like, when you look at college basketball, it's like 23 to 46, which is, if anybody played college basketball, I wasn't good enough to make it. So hopefully no offense taken. But basically what I'm getting at, it's like no defense. So when you think about the corner 3, it's also a hard shot to defend. But what I'm getting at is, I forgot to put that last slide in there, but I was going to put in a automation tool here. And one of the automation tools I talk about a lot is Vercel, where you could just type the word now and it deploys. Like, that's your 3-point shot. Like, when you can think of automation pieces to, like, say, I'm going to go into a project, I'm going to basically take the development time, the deploy time down to from minutes to seconds. Like, those are the things you want to be looking for. So in order to explain a couple more actions, I have to explain another project, which I mentioned earlier, which is called Open Sauced. I named this project because of Gucci Mane being Atlanta-based rapper. He's also the godfather of trap music. I would say he's okay. And so many people have basically laughed him at this point when it comes to rap music. But there was this one interview on Tumblr of all places back in the late 2000s or the aughts. If you don't got sauce, then you lost. And he was basically talking about having skill as a musician or a rapper. So basically, I built this project called Open Sauce because I wanted to contribute more open source, but I didn't have sauce to understand how to contribute to open source or make that connection. So I built this to basically kind of cheat and do open source this way. It's a GraphQL app. It's built on the GitHub API. It's wrapped around that sort of primitive. It's also a React app as well. And I'm using a tool called AuthGuardian to handle my JWT management. So again, these are all GitHub integrated apps that make my job a lot easier. My side project job a lot easier. And this is what it looks like. And this is why I built the GitHub Hackathon this way, is because I had experience in building GitHub repos as backends, which again, not even again, I don't recommend it. It takes a little bit of effort. Also, rate limiting is a beast. So if you don't want to get rate limited, maybe get a real database. But I like the challenge. Also, I work at GitHub and I can get unblocked and rate limiting with a Slack message, which is not okay, but I understand. Sometimes you just gotta roll with it. But basically, all my goals are on the left. All my goals on the right. They're just simply GitHub issues. That's my database or GitHub issues. So I bring this up because the syncing between the repo and the sort of upstream, which is how you basically talk to open source, I handle through a GitHub action. And the repo itself, the upstream repo, is called goals template. And that's what every user of open source gets a fork of goals template. And then you basically sync the two through an upstream. Now, I'm butchering explaining this, but this is basically the pattern of when you fork a repo and then you clone it, and then more stuff happens on the upstream, but your fork gets out of sync. Like you want to make that fork, the main branch of the fork, to stay in sync. So I created this GitHub action to basically do that. So apologies, I don't know why I had to make a plug for open source or not. Maybe it's the pizza over my, I almost got it. The pizza over my head. But this is
explain a little bit about open source. Like, how does this help you get into open source a little bit more?
Yeah.
Like,
So
what was that doing for you?
Yeah. So basically what happened to me, what happens with a lot of people is like, I don't know if you could hear kids screaming because they're all downstairs. Like I don't have a lot of free time on the weekends, and I used to write a lot of code on the weekends. Say what? Oh, oh no, you're hearing my kids, but it sounds like you can't hear my kids, so we're all good.
Everybody's kids.
Sorry, it's like saying dad in Walmart. It's like that's the wrong thing. But what I'm getting at is open source. Basically, I have a limited amount of time I want to contribute to open source project. So the way I do it is I stalk the projects on open source, and then I can take notes and like pick out the key figures. So I guess the best way to actually is to show it.
So this is a personal, like,
yeah, 100% personal.
So you find projects you're interested in. This is a personal dashboard that keeps tabs on certain things, and then when you have time or you see something that you can fix, that gives you the ability to jump into it. So a single dashboard instead of looking at 15 different repos.
Exactly. And the problem I usually have is I'll see a project that's like, hey, I should work on that, or hey, I can probably provide some input, and sort of, because a lot of times I do open source to grow a different part of my developer skill set. Like if someone, like I do a lot of like Vue outside of my day job, because we do a lot of, actually vice versa. We actually do a lot more Vue in my team. So I do a lot of React at home. So like saving projects like Gatsby and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to grab an issue and save an issue. Gatsby is a big project, so it takes a while, but I could take some notes, hit save. And then if I went to the whole thing is that I want to be able to give your data. I don't want to keep your data. Also, I don't want a database, which is why I use GitHub issues for this. So the way it works is that I get to have that note stored in an issue. So if I wanted to just use a repo for my organization, I can, except it looks like it didn't save. So it looks like there's a bug or something's not connected here, which I've seen this. All right.
Okay.
Who broke my app?
Creates an issue on your system
Yes.
for you to remind yourself like where you want to do. Does this require you to fork the repo to start with, or are you looking at the main repo branch?
Yeah, no, you're just looking at the main repo, the issues. You look at the players, the contributors. If you want to set up notifications, you can set them up with Code Triage here. Code Triage is a completely separate project that's been in existence for a long time, but it basically gives you some email notifications and updates that happens in the project. And then you could actually, I've already forked this repo, so I can see my fork. I do want to actually add a feature to sync the fork with the upstream, which my fork is 5 years old, like 4 years old. That's the last time I contributed to Gatsby. So not a great example, but that's basically what the project is. It's just a stock project. It's not very useful today. What I'm actually working on right now is a new version of this. And I just got off stream talking about this, which slightly out of context of GitHub Actions. But essentially what this is the recommendation engine for open source. So instead of you bringing your own repos and stalking them, it's going to recommend repos for you based on what your interest is. So that's what I'm working on right now. And these are my light example. But again, this is all more me just want to have fun. I want to make the distinction that this is not GitHub building anything. Because sometimes I actually started building this before I joined GitHub. I gave a presentation at GitHub Universe about this one project, and then GitHub hired me. So if you want to know more about my story, I have a whole YouTube video about it where I explain how I got my job at GitHub. But also, I only have a couple more slides. I'm happy to answer questions too as well towards the end. But does the syncing the forks though, does that kind of resonate for anybody? Does anybody else have that issue or just me?
Branch.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea is this never touch the main branch. So if you do operate in forks, which some teams do, open source does, never touch the main branch because that's what you want to always stay up to date and have the most pristine Git history. And then your PR will not go to your main branch. It will go to the upstreams, which is the main projects. So I'm trying to build some guardrails around open source. So that way, if anybody's sort of like, hey, I just want to contribute, or it's my first month writing code, but I want to contribute back to this documentation. The idea of pulling, forking, pushing, merging, rebase, you can get a little lost in the sauce, pun intended. So what open source is basically, it's going to be a subset of features and rules to help encourage people to do open source, but also get handheld a little bit. So moving along, because I mentioned I only have a couple more slides, and then I could show off actions, or I can answer questions, but I did want to point out that I do have a YouTube playlist, which I shout out to myself. I actually updated this from I Like Robot to bdougie. They both work at the moment, or they'll both work forever. I Like Robot was like my college handle. bdougie is my professional handle, so I've updated it to bdougie. I've just had YouTube for that long. But if you wanted to go through and deep dive into GitHub Actions, I just do a lot of video content. Sorry, do you have a question, Damien? Was it the camera video?
That was the first link you sent.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, it is on my YouTube. It technically is on my YouTube, so it's actually it's not my video. But oh yeah, everybody go to subscribe. Yeah, and you know what? Okay. I have another channel called Open Sauced, and I thought I had an origin story. Maybe it's in the about. Maybe it's not there, but it's somewhere. Actually, I think it's on Dev too. But honestly, if you just Google open source, there's not a lot of content out there. It will be this one. So this this is a condensed version of what I shared at GitHub Universe. GitHub Universe, I talked more about GraphQL, which I don't even know what the name of that video was, to be quite honest. But it's out there. Brian Douglas is a very generic name, so Brian Douglas GraphQL might get you close in the Google foo. And I did want to shout out that if you wanted to build your own GitHub action, there is a really cool lab.github.com course. Lab.github.com, also not a lot of people are aware of it, and I realize that, but it's a lot of self-paced tutorials that are not video-based, they're all repo-based. So you fork a repo and it opens an issue, and then the issue tells you what to do next. And then once you do that thing, the issue would then close and then open another issue. So it's all built on top of Probot, actually. Probot being the thing I mentioned before. And it's a self-guided course. So you will have a GitHub action and a repo at the end of the day. Very clever stuff. We have some genius people at GitHub. And that was actually my last slide. I will definitely take questions, but I did want to also, for whatever reason, I failed to add a slide for this. But I have this organization called GitHub Craftwork, and there's a repo called Start Here. And the whole reason for this is it will actually teach you all about GitHub Actions by just reading here. So you start with 0, which is you leverage an action to invite yourself to the organization. This is really just for novelty reasons, but it will invite you to organizations. So think you're doing a whole presentation on GitHub or something else, but you want everybody in the org to have the training. It's a nice little GitHub action to do it, a GitHub action I wrote. And then you start the tutorial, and then you do the hello world, and then you eventually make shoes, and then you learn about CI with GitHub, or GitHub Actions, rather. So yeah, thanks to folks who have been dropping links all day too as well. It's been appreciated. And then at that point, that concludes my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
I got a question. Any way that you've used GitHub Actions to upload any of the applications to any of the cloud services like AWS or Azure?
Me personally, no, but I do have examples though. So you probably want examples rather than a story. I just don't, I use a lot of third-party services that use Azure and AWS underneath. And I do that intentionally because in my role, most people don't need to know those examples. But excuse me why I stall and grab a link, because I just created a gist for this, but I can't share all my private information yet.
That's okay.
Not until I quit GitHub. Then I'll expose everything. So no, I definitely won't do that. Sorry. So here's a gist. And this question actually came up today. So I live stream every day, every Tuesday and Thursday, which I had mentioned bdougie Live, which is here. I actually just streamed an hour before I jumped on this call. And so if you're interested, I have way more context probably 1 hour into this stream. But if you wanted just a link to a gist, I can share this and then talk through it. So this is not even the right one, is it? Oh no, here you go, Azure. So yeah, this one walks through an example, and this is again, this is something I shared on my post. It was actually my last post that I shared.
Yeah,
Set up continuous delivery. Sorry, go ahead, James.
No, I'm sorry. I was just seeing it right now. The YML file.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so if I mute myself and I sort of show a nice blurry fashion, because I'm not sure why this player is blurry, but if you wanted to set a continuous deployment and have the jobs that are dependent on other jobs and deploy to staging and have required reviews, that's basically what this article is about. But if I walk through this example, which is also in that video, and this is a good question because I didn't break down actions. So let me actually break down line by line. So, and all actions are basically YAML files that power either your CI or your CD or your automation that you're looking to do. Real quick, this workflow dispatch, anything in the on flag are basically events. So when I mentioned webhooks as part of the primitives of GitHub, like these events are the webhooks. So workflow dispatch is not actually a webhook. It's a manual trigger. So it actually adds a button into your repo where you can manually run this action, which I do have an example under bdougie / So I have a repo where I test. I do a lot of prototyping and testing just for throwaway reasons. And I just did this in no-op. So short CD, there we go. So basically this button right here is what workflow dispatch gives you. It just adds a button into your action tab, which I didn't break this down. I sort of made a lot of assumptions I probably shouldn't have. But if you do have actions enabled in a repo, you will have this tab. And if you don't have any actions installed, it will ask you if you'd like to set up a setup workflow or startup workflow. So that's how you'd want to get started. Which mental note, I should actually add that to my presentation because I'm sure you would want to know how to get started too as well, not just examples. But then these other webhooks are running on pull requests or on pushes specifically to the main branch. So if I have a feature branch, a release branch, the actions won't run. If I wanted to run on every branch, I would just delete line number 9 and line number 6. But because for testing purposes, I'm just going to do it on the main branch because I'm just trying to prove a point. And then within jobs, you can get up to 23 asynchronous jobs within an action workflow. I said 23, but I really meant to say 22. I always mix those numbers up for whatever reason. I have no idea why. But anyway, which means each job within this workflow and in any other workflow I have, they could all run at the same time, but only 22 of them. So which means 23 will pause and wait until number 1 is done or whichever one finishes first. So this is essentially, all this is doing is just setting up my, this action right here is called checkout. It's built by the actions team. And the other thing I should probably point out too as well, which I kind of really breezed through and didn't even explain a lot of the stuff, but that's why I actually pointed to my blog post because I explained everything over 28 days. But this is just a GitHub repo. So actions can be files inside your repo, or they can be GitHub repos pointed somewhere else. So if I went to actions checkout, you can see this is actually a GitHub repo that I can use. So if I wanted to use another action off the top of my head, which I know is an action I've used, which is called create an issue. If I want to automate it creating issues, so I have an example where my team, actually it's a real life example. My team is all remote. So I've got a team member in Melbourne, Australia. I've got a team member in Ireland, somewhere outside like Northern Ireland. And I got team members all over the US. So the way we do stand-ups is we do issues. So instead of us trying to like sync up and have a meeting every day, we open up an issue and then you just write in the issue, hey, this is what I'm working on. And we do that once a week. And I automate that on a cron job, which is another workflow event that you could do, where the issue opens up like clockwork every Sunday morning because of Australia, and then also closes on Friday afternoons because of America, because we stop working on Friday. So that was one of my first actions I built. Never had to edit it. It just works like clockwork. And that's my entire team is built around the fact that we're gonna open up, this issue is gonna open up, and we're gonna tell it what we're doing, and then it's gonna automatically close. And then our managers and everybody who wants to look at our team, because GitHub is all on GitHub, they can look at this issue. So that's one example. And then I'll briefly go through the rest of it. Like I could pick node versions. Caching is something you probably want to consider using the actions cache. So being able to cache your node modules. Installing dependencies using the cache. So the other thing is that the cache itself, it's actually checking to see if the cache was hit. And this is the output that's actually received from that. So you can actually talk from one job to the other job using the shorthand context. I'm blanking on the terms, but basically you basically this embedded context block that comes back. But then to answer your question, James, setting up a container registry, in this context, they're building a container using Docker, the Docker action. That container is now going to be sent to Azure, the Azure registry. And then we're going to deploy that to the registry using all the shorthand, which is all the context that we get when the actual running environment. The other thing I want to point out is like deploying for reviews. You can actually block deployments based on protected branches, which is another feature, again, that not a lot of people use. But in the context of this is great because if your main branch cannot be merged until James says, yes, this code looks good, then it won't deploy at this point. So you can actually block that. And there's a GitHub Universe talk that this actual code is taken from. It's called Continuous Delivery in GitHub Actions. That's the example that he goes through is what I'm showing right now. And then all this sort of Azure stuff, deploying the staging, you have separate staging environments. GitHub also has environments that, again, not a lot of people use. But I think the beauty of it is that GitHub Actions kind of take a lot of the features that we've been building for the past couple of years, and they're combining them into these nice archetypes of type features. Because it's funny, because I've been using environments since they shipped, but not a lot of people know about them.
Very cool. I got a couple of questions.
Okay, that's good.
Go for it, Jeremy.
So the first question is, you mentioned Git Actions are a way to provide features and functionality that GitHub doesn't provide, right? What features and functionality does GitHub provide that we should be taking more advantage of before we try to create our own action? Is there a resource that we can look at for it?
A resource. So I'll mention the caveat that GitHub's a power tool, meaning that like you could hurt yourself if you don't read the instructions, but also you can kind of figure it out. So, but with that being said, GitHub's been around for a while, where if you signed up for GitHub 10 years ago, GitHub has new features that you might not be aware of. It's like one of them being that we do have a Slack app that integrates, like my example of, actually I didn't use this example because it's already a built-in feature for GitHub. But if you want to notify your team that those PRs open, you could actually install the GitHub app on Slack, and it's built into your repos, and it provides all the context and the extra information in your settings if you want to manage that. Another example is like draft PRs, which I always use as like an action example as well. It's now a built-in feature. That's the other thing is like some of these actions and some of the GitHub apps that we've seen built by the community have become GitHub features after a while. So if you want to have a PR, but you don't want anybody to review it, you can actually make it a draft if you like.
Okay.
It might be a hard question for me to know what features do you not know of.
Well, is there a blog post or a documentation of what features GitHub provides to us?
All the features, probably not. We do have github.com/features.
Okay.
But these will all be like the features we want you to care about because we don't think you know about them. So things like security. Actually, security is a good one. The security tab on your GitHub repo is something to pay attention to. So if you are using JavaScript, or actually if you are using JavaScript, it's a JavaScript meetup. You can actually check to see if there's any open security policies or advisories for any of the projects you're using. You might have heard of Dependabot. Dependabot is actually the same team, and they're actually working together to be able to share those publicly in your repo if you install it. But this is actually embedded into your repo to get these security advisories. So at the moment, I've got 0 because I'm such an awesome developer and I believe in maintenance. But yeah, there's some other stuff like GitHub packages is something else. If you want to deploy, if you don't want to deploy to NPM for whatever reason, like you have like a private package for just your team, but you want your entire team to have access to it in all their repos, GitHub packages is something else. GitHub Marketplace is a great place. If you have an idea for a GitHub app or action, you can actually host it on GitHub Marketplace. I didn't even mention about self-hosted runners. Actually, this is a great, they actually did update this a couple months ago. This is the first time I've actually looked at it.
Okay.
I'd also
drop that link in the chat.
Yeah, I'll drop this because I was about to mention this, and then I'll drop the features. Yeah, because this was underwhelming for a while, and it seems to have everything I should be talking about right here. But I will mention the GitHub Roadmap too as well, which is another feature which you should know about, which is projects. And we basically have put the roadmap out publicly for anybody to see what we're working on in the future. So at the moment, I guess we're about rounding out March Q1. But yeah, it's Dependabot stuff. Yeah, here's some like top level stuff that we think you should probably know is happening.
Nice. And another thing you talked about was before writing something yourself, you should probably see if something already exists and fork from there or learn from that. Are there actions that we can?
Yes. I think I might be answering your
system
question as you're
and utilize?
Yeah. So if you go to GitHub Marketplace, which I should probably turn off my staff bar so you guys don't know all the secrets of GitHub. If you look at all the, you can see all the GitHub actions by going to Marketplace and then searching just for actions. If you just wanted to see all the bdougie actions, you can even search by contributor. So you can see I'm prolific on Marketplace. 5 actions at this point, which I think all 4 of them I mentioned. Actually, 3 of them. Actually, I didn't mention this one, but you can pin issues to your repository, which I don't have a great example of. I could show you my team repo, but
okay. So Marketplace is the answer for that. Like, as a beginner, is there a recommended way to ease into this, right? Because I've been using GitHub for a while. I got the pull request thing down. I've got a couple open source projects and contributors to it, and I see some of the automation stuff that you've done around the pull request. But is there a entry point to wet your feet in this scenario that you recommend? A couple of entry level actions that will do something to get you started.
Yeah, I would actually probably it's easier to find a repetitive task and then apply to that, so you can see if. So if you do find that, hey, no one's closing their issues when they're done with it, how can we ensure that the entire team or myself closes the issues? Or even better, I'm not even using issues. Like, how can I introduce issues into my workflow? So like, should I start planning my projects? It's something that I tend to do before I get on streams is I try to have issues written. And then the other thing is like, so I have this issue where, I'm trying to create Yelp reviews, which you can see I spelled this wrong. But also all I did was do a screenshot because I was, in my mind, I'm like, hey, I'm going to write out this beautiful issue later. And 7 days later, I didn't do it. So like, I think a great action would be reminding people that you open the issue and it's unassigned, which is something I started writing in October. Actually, I think I might have wrote this already. I just haven't publicized it yet. But you can see I have repetitive problems that I'm trying to solve for myself. But yeah, stuff like that, like unassigned, like if something's unassigned, having something to say like, hey, perhaps we should assign this issue. I've seen people who have bots through GitHub Actions that write comments. And then what's cool about this is that you could actually go use the bot to delete the comment and then write a new one to actually trigger a new notification. I've seen a lot of trickery with like that and like bending GitHub to its will.
Right.
I also
Very cool.
Some trivial stuff that I've done is the idea, it's called gift action, which I don't think is in the marketplace. Honestly, I would say even
GIF action.
I pronounce it gift.
It's the correct way. Gift is correct.
It's a gift.
Gift. This action is essentially you just type in .gift and then a word and it returns a gift with that word in it. And I want to say I probably don't have this somewhere. Let me show you live me adding it to a project.
Nice.
Yeah, that'll be nice.
Yeah, so the one thing I didn't actually point out too as well, again, I made a lot of assumptions dependent on how much time I had, but every repo has a .github folder. Sorry, not every repo has a .github folder, but extra like more power tool type features are go into the .github folder. So like your issue template, your PR templates, your code owners folder. Actually, code owners file actually doesn't have to be in the .github, but we've actually leveraged .github as a place to kind of like add some cutting edge features. So it's a folder to kind of peek at whenever you look at other projects in open source to see what they're doing. And I am going to do this. So I had an action here that actually runs that would actually run JavaScript inside of a comment. That's what this is, but I'm going to delete this and add this project. That was awful. Okay. Try that again. My copy paste skills are off. Oh, it's because I copied it from the URL. The other thing I wanted to point out is that you need to add a tag. So it could be either be a SHA, like a commit SHA, or it could be a branch, or it could be a tag. So if I had like version 1 as a tag, I could do that. But I don't have any of that, so I'm just going to do main. And then I'm going to delete all this stuff because it's not needed. You could actually run actions on a number of different environments. So if I wanted to run this on Mac OS, I could, but why? Let's just do Ubuntu. That tends to work the best. And I think, oh, you know what I did? I deleted the steps too as well. So within jobs, I mentioned for James, 22 asynchronous jobs. Within each of those jobs, you can have synchronous steps. And the way you do that is actually have steps. So if I wanted to have a second step that ran a bit of bash or shell rather, I could do that as well. And it would be, if I wanted to have a multi-line step, I could do that as well through a pipe.
Neat.
Which I think I don't need the quotes. Nope. I need to. YAML's hard, but all this is YAML, so we'll stick with it. I'll commit this to main branch, and then what I'll do is I'll find the issue, because this is all this repo's for, is this testing, and let's say should I roll the dice and just say Florida? Let's do it. All right, so I haven't triggered an action yet in this conversation, but the way this works, it's either going to fail or succeed. Looks like it's not failing. I did kind of show this in a screenshot of the workflow visualizer. So if I did have dependent jobs, you could see this waiting for the next job. And then I can click through and see now my gift action is building. Now, to run something trivial like a bot to return a comment, not as like it doesn't make sense to use that in a GitHub action, because as you can see, it's going to take up to 30 seconds to go talk to the Giphy API and then come back and then print a comment. And it looks like I got some deprecations in my my gift JavaScript library, but we'll ignore that for now.
Coding.
Yeah. And
yeah, I think it makes sense.
Okay, and it also failed because I don't actually have my gift token. I didn't actually supply a gift token. Yeah, it's right here, which I'm confident I actually added already to this repo, which is, again, for Jeremy, your question, features that you maybe didn't know about GitHub. We do have secrets per repo, and this came in because of GitHub Actions. So then I can see my Giphy token is right here. So I should be good to go. Based on that, I shouldn't need a GitHub token. That's something else that I did write a blog post about, the idea of GitHub tokens. The GitHub token that you get by default, the authentication, it's limited to read only. So with commenting, I think commenting is opted in. It's okay. Yeah, the only thing is you have to pass in. Sorry, GitHub Actions without a token is limited to only read only. So I can't write a comment unless I add a token. Oop, that was, I'm not sure what I copied from there.
Okay.
I will need to use the raw version. There we go. That'll be easy to copy and paste. But I did want to show off this fancy gift. Did I just...
Submit a bug.
All right. Looks like this should be... Well, I'll get rid of this extra step because I don't need that. But that's where it went. Copy and pasting is not my forte, for sure. You think I would be better at it after so many years?
After being a developer, that's all I do.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know if Stack Overflow ever went down, I'd I'd be out of a job.
Like the saying goes, if you got to think about the fact that the guy who built Stack Overflow or the lady that built Stack Overflow did it without Stack Overflow.
Yeah, they probably had to use IRC or something more old school.
Yes, sir.
What do you call it? The punch cards.
Bulletin boards at your local grocery store.
Yeah.
So let's see this magic.
All right, we're gonna see if this fails or succeeds.
I'd like how you
it'd be great if I, yeah, and it would be great if I cache this. Basically, this gift action is built on top of a. It's built within a repo, but it's also leveraging a Docker container, so it's doing a bit of work to get started. Right. You don't have to use Docker to build actions. It's just that I've been using actions since the beginning, so I use Docker to build actions because that was the only way. Now. Sorry, I was just laughing because the Mandalorian, this is the way. But with that being said, that you can use just JavaScript if you wanted to build a Docker action. And it looks like I have another failure. It's because I put bdougie token and not. Anyway, trust me, there is probably an issue that this works on. No one wants to sit here and watch me debug this live, but basically this should not be.
That's what your Twitch is for, right?
Yes, this should be GitHub token, not bdougie token. GitHub token is what you get for free from a GitHub action, which I think I talk in this post about.
So it sounds like there's a lot you can do with GitHub Actions.
Yep.
You've written extensively about it. This is what your day job is. Be sure to check out bdougie.live so that way you can see when he's live streaming coding on Twitch. You've been posting daily, multiple times a day, short videos about GitHub Actions. So be sure to check out that series and follow him on Twitter. He's always posting stuff about this. Thank you so much, bdougie, for coming out. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Any last questions?
Oh,
No,
Brian,
it looks
one
like-
last thing before we go, because we have to give giveaways in it. Just a second, I'll go take it on in a second. Do you know anything about what I saw? Perhaps it was one of my repos that we're no longer going to be able to use your username and passwords when doing forks and cloning?
Yes.
Is that a new thing?
It's a new thing as of, it's been a new thing for over a year. We've been telling people in our changelog. So we do have, so it's a new thing and there's an easy fix if you don't already, if you still use passwords. So to explain this real quick, actually, GitHub/blog and then changelog is definitely something to keep up to date to as well, because the updates will be in the changelog. But for the context, anybody who's not really sure what Damien was saying, whenever I do like git push, I need to authenticate with GitHub. And the way normally you would do it is you would just type in, like you'd git push and then Git would tell you to use your username, and then you'd paste in or copy or write your password. That is going away. You can't actually type in your password on the command line anymore to interface with Git as of September of this year. So it won't be in September 21 is when we're going to cut it off. So you will be able to do it for another 6 months. But the easiest way to actually get around that is that GitHub just wants to authenticate to you and your repos. And so I highly recommend just use the GitHub CLI. You don't have to do anything with it. It just gives you a lot more commands to interact with your repositories. So if I wanted to, so for one, installing the CLI is pretty easy with Homebrew. You can also do it if you're on a Mac. Sorry, if you're on a Windows or a Linux machine, it'll tell you something different. But I'm on a Mac. But if I did GH repo issues rather. Actually, what was it? I just saw the command.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Anyway, what I'm getting at is that you do get some extra interactions with the repositories. I haven't actually. So this is my repo for that project. I can interact with my entire GitHub repo from the command line.
Yeah.
If you don't care about that, just by GH authenticating, that's enough to authenticate you to GitHub. So if you still want to operate due to command line the same way you've done it, you just have to do GH auth.
And so
Speaking
I do
of this topic,
Go ahead.
are we able to have multiple accounts? Like, so I have one for my work and I have one for my personal stuff. How do I keep those two separated?
That's a good question. That's probably in the docs.
Okay.
I haven't had to have two accounts in a long time because all my stuff's on GitHub and I use GitHub. I did used to do this back in the day, but I said it's consolidated. But I understand the use case, and I want to say that it's covered to be able to authenticate between the two accounts. I don't know off the top of my head, but the cool thing about this is that this is open source. So if you wanted to go, if the question wasn't covered in the documentation, you could write that feature, which I've done. I've written some features for the GitHub CLI so far. Or you can just open the issue and sort of wait until someone ships it.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Thank you, Brian, so much for this. What I'll do is, if you don't mind, I'll take over the screen, and then we'll go ahead and do what we always do at the end of the presentation, which is see yourselves. That's not what I meant to do. Let's switch it to, there we go. So let's get you guys out of the way for a second. So thank you. If you guys want to join me at, and Brian, you're welcome to do so at win.floridajs.com. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And sorry, if I click on that, I get a ticket. That's not what I meant to do. So you guys will, if you go there, you'll see your name, your number for your ticket appear on the page, and then eventually we'll give away license to JetBrains. So as everybody does that, goes to win.floridajs.com and just goes there, clicks on OK, and their name appears. If it's before 7, don't worry, we have it. You will be able to be winning regardless of whether you see your number there or not. But Brian, thank you so much. It is a great honor to have someone like yourself come join us in our group. You have, like I said, I love the camera. I love the presentation. Definitely going to sign up to the YouTube pages. I'll put some links on the YouTube stream, but if anybody wants to, remember that on the chat of Zoom right now, there's all the links that that Brian has shown us. So he can go ahead and you can go ahead and copy those, or just wait a little bit later. But that's great. Jeremy's leaving us. All right.
No,
so
I was saying bye to other people.
Thank you. I was going to say, well, you can say bye unfortunately. But okay. So it's time for picking some. Does anybody need more time to go ahead and go to win.floridajs.com?
I think we got everybody.
Perfect. Again, there's a license for JetBrains. James, did you enjoy your license?
So far, yeah.
Love it.
I'm planning on expanding it to making the Angular version of the Florida Iguana tracker that I was working on.
Fancy.
Nice.
All right. I like that. I like what you're doing. One of these days, when you're ready, you got to present that at the next meeting. But let's find a winner here. That was the ticket that I had on the year, so I know none of you will get that ticket. If you do, if I'm wrong, let me know. Is there anybody with a 1? I have a feeling.
I have ticket 1.
Wonderful. Ethan, go ahead and contact me through either, are you on the Slack channel?
Yeah.
Perfect. Go ahead and find me on there. So it's techhubsouthflorida.org/Slack for anybody else. you get the winning prize of being able to contact us, me and Jeremy. And Ethan, go ahead and contact me, and I'll give you the license for any JetBrains product you'd like, with a year's worth of upgrades, and you can leave it for life. Brian,
Thanks,
you so
Damien.
much.
Just want to say
Fantastic. Go
this
for it.
is Anthony Bazio. My Zoom is still logged in for my kid.
Perfect. And sounds good. Sounds good. You could have told me that on
Thanks.
Slack as well. No, that so perfect.
All right,
I'll look
all right.
for your contact information, and we'll continue that. Don't forget that at the end of the month, on the 30th, we have Ray Bango. Brian, have you heard of Ray Bango? He's kind of in there.
Yeah, I think former Microsoft employee you mentioned.
For
Twitter
Microsoft,
famous.
former part of the jQuery founders team. So absolutely. So he'll be on the 30th. So you're in good company, Brian. So it looks like we're going to keep at the level that we have with bringing in Brian here. We'll sort of keep him on the same level in the next meeting. And we'll see what happens at the last one. Then all of a sudden we'll drop down to either me and Jeremy, which is a real drop down. Hopefully, your ears won't pop when that happens. Thank you, everybody. Jeremy, you going to say any other words?
No.
Thank you, everybody, for
Have a
joining
good night,
us.
everybody. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you so much. See you later. Thank you, Brian.